Okay, yeah, I just want to take a little bit of time here and think about, the Israeli flag, the 6-point Star of David, the Israeli flag, that's the 6-point or 2 triangles. I was thinking about the delta force and triangles and the pi r squared and E equal mc squared, which seem to be more so of the linguistic alphanumerics involving monetary and domestic of neighborhoods, as compared to exponential quotients of powers of multiplication. It seemed to be the thing more so of like corporate law and importing and exporting and commercial venue of living quarter as compared to anything else. Maybe it's a Charles Barkley statement, anything less would be uncivilized. And that's kind of like where I think that he's referring to something like that as anything less would be uncivilized, would be maybe not necessarily the thought of a commercial venue of living quarter. That's not considered a neighborhood. Not a question of lifespan as any intellectual duration or method of banking or any idea between appreciation or depreciation or annuity or settlement, having litigation and de facto and res habeas corpus being involved that way. But the thing with this is that, I was thinking about the Israeli flag and certain information, and it's kind of like, and even the architecture, the platform, embedded encryption, and one little shelf on the wall on A row in Angleton, Texas. It's a state, federal, local authority structure, and it has the amenities of like Fred Flintstone, and bedrock. But in any case, it's kind of like it's looking at that shelf and it has the 2 triangles, and it's just now kind of like clicking in my mind about, the history of the U.S. dollar defined and explained. Not that it's explained or that it really has to be that way, it's just that that's the information in the book Secrets of the Temple, How the Federal Reserve Runs the Country, is at the U.S. dollar below the equator. Involved like a mammon, yet through some academic transition, it's referring to Latin in both ways of the location geographically, and yet the mammon and yet the thing about something that would be, some idea of whether or not that the idea of money would be the thought of maybe some idea of like a biblical scripture, the root of all evil being money. Yet money is a categorization, and if the only thing about really the categorization of money is maybe not the normal thought of maybe non-degreed participation, or maybe the thought of maybe not participation at all, would be maybe more so the endorsement of a categorization of money, not limited to the U.S. dollar. Completely, different in, I don't want to call it retrospect, or yet boundaries and limitations that would only present maybe the idea of maybe not degreed, and based upon economic factors of like being non-degreed would be like the meaning and value of like a value that has been achieved and accomplished based upon a preference of some idea. Most people sort of like earning as compared to like some idea of like earning annuity that lasts throughout generations and generations, maintaining the thought of annuity as an earned given, as a point of origin, as compared to some thought like, oh my God, the employee has got a description of earning, actually requires time on site, Not necessarily the thought of having the right to assemble a bunch of endorsements, but, or, not a breach of copyright, and having, intellectual property is like having fair use as an easement, is having a right to assemble, and the freedom of press and the freedom of speech, and voila, having a right to assemble. It's like, wow, thanks, But anyway, so like I was thinking about that shelf on the wall, it has the 2 triangles, okay, like the delta force. And okay, the thing about the book Secrets of the Temple, How the Federal Reserve Runs the Country, is that the history of the U.S. dollar below the equator is identifying a factor that even Obama is referring to as Persian Gulf, involving like Al Qaeda and now it's kind of like, it's almost like the Israeli flag, and the horizontal parameters. It's almost suggesting, the thought of like two delta forces. And I'm just kind of like realizing a little bit of something about that, because some idea of like a 90 degree of M is in alphanumeric in linguistics. M is in is 13 to 14 is like 55 heaven and sky at a 90 degree would present the isometric volume. Sometimes more so involved with the word circumference as compared to maybe the area of a circle. So like that's a flat plane, but the thing with this is that isometric volume presents the three-dimensional thing about actual participation, and that's the way I see like circumference is presenting the actual participation of like isometric volume. But anyway, so like but it's kind of like thinking about Obama referring to it, and it's kind of like he said it, and I thought that was like so far beyond like not cool, that he's like trying to demonize you, and it's kind of like, well, are you referring to like trying to demonize YouTube? Oh my God, are you kidding me? But he had referred to Al Qaeda, and I was like talking about it a little bit earlier on my channel, WadeSVPRDDY.com, that in linguistic alphanumeric said it got to the point of like the acronym OSHA, and that one cycle of frequency above the letter N in Latin terminology presenting what seemed to be the delta force, it's a triangle, and now it's seemingly to be the Star of David with two triangles and like the delta force and a misappropriation allocation of the Mississippi that way. And with the history of the U.S. dollar below the equator referring to Latin America, ultimately Amazon, and like even like the Persian Gulf involving the Nile and the Euphrates, is kind of like and now it seems to be that Al Qaeda being in pronunciation and can be pronounced. Al Qaeda is kind of like it's almost like the pie. I swear, the line is there, the formula works, and there's more to it, and that it's there, and it's going to be there, and there's going to be an answer, and it's going to be found, and it's like made that way, and everyone knows it works, okay? And that's kind of like that way after a period of like years, decades of like studying alphanumeric linguistic alphanumerics and analytical and symbolic and all that. I mean, it ultimately gets to a point of a process of elimination that it's almost like a blink of an eye, split second thought, as compared to a whole bunch of time as a process of elimination, and years of it ultimately gets to like a real fast thought process and automatic direction, without really even having to think about it. The thing with this is that and now it's kind of like the Star of David, the Israeli flag presents the two triangles like two delta forces, the biggest mouth of the river, and electronically the triangle represents the delta force, yet the biggest mouth of the river, yet at the same time the frequency of half above and half below the center line of oscillation, and then there's like McDonald's golden arches with both half cycles above what would be like the thought of the equator, the operator, of a degree level reference centers of concentric participation, yet the half above and half below the center line of oscillation is almost like being side by side, like McDonald's golden arches at a 90 degree, swimming upstream, like a misappropriation allocation in Mississippi. Almost the thought of like degree level reference centers of concentric participation, yet almost like the affirmative fallopian tube, and the word being that it is relation between like architecture and platform. More so, but more so referred to as architecture platform. Embedding encryption, it's not quite the same. It's almost like the thought of like McDonald's golden arches and the one frequency up half above, half below, side by side, and at a 90, swimming upward. It's almost like the equator at a 90 degree, presenting it like the ladder that's talked about as the fish, normally salmon, swimming upstream, referring to a ladder in a river that the fish actually is claiming to use. It's referred to as like a ladder in the river. Yet like geographically, like with the equator, it's almost like the coordinates, and like a ladder. The same principle, like the fertility, the the symbolic representation, the progression, the growth, the projected, and all that, it's the thing about it, but it seemed to be that Barack Obama referring to like Al Qaeda, it got to that Al Qaeda would be like allocation, and then ultimately it would be like the acronym of OSHA, based upon the thought of like Jesus said he knew for the foundations of the earth, okay, and the thing with it is that that's like almost like before the foundations, like the front lines of the beach under international financial management and vice president network of like multinational corporations and import and export and like immigration customs enforcement representing some idea of like a vice president network and methods of banking of international multiple international banking systems. And now it's kind of like I was kind of like thinking about it, and it's kind of like I'm just now like really kind of clicking to the Al Qaeda reference by Barack Obama. The academic thing of like transition is almost like it's almost what representative of Christianity of what the baptism is. Yet in reality, the crucifixion, the death and resurrection of the Lord Jesus Christ, and then going to the plateau and ascending into the sky and re-entering heaven. And that one word in the book of Thessalonians, transfiguration, out verse 192, about the transfiguration and like what that is in Christianity that way. It's even identified on the home theater, and the thing about I've seen it both MKC and MKHC on Cadillac and Lincoln Continental. I'm actually trying to remember which Cadillac it was. I mean, it's like automatic. I don't know why I'm like kind of like I have to think about it real quick, but it's like Cadillac, and I've seen it both ways with MKHC and MKZ. It's like mega kilohertz, and it's actually identified like that on the home theater. I don't know if it's just mine, but previously in hi-fi, 192 anything was not identified readily visible as some program digitized like LED readout on the display window. Yet the home theater identified it, and I'm not sure if that's actually limited to amplification or practical application in the way of when and where what is actually used, and I'm almost assuming that would be almost like pi squared equal MC squared of like monetary and domestic of like neighborhoods as compared to exponential quotients of powers of multiplication, seemingly of commercial venue of living quarters. That would be probably the thought of maybe not limited to corporate law or U.S. patents protecting idea of like the freedom of annuity as compared to the thought of like deed restrictions involving the thought of like television programming and the difference between litigation de facto res habeas corpus as compared to like settlement of depreciation or like annuity of like appreciation. But anyway, so like thinking about that, because it seemed to be the thing about the two triangles, the 6-point star of David, an Israeli flag, it seemed to be presenting that information now, kind of like just now thinking about it, and Barack Obama referring to like Al Qaeda being like allocation, yet at the same time in pronunciation like ocean, occasion, and instead of occasion, ocean. Instead of it sounding like the C sounding like a K, it's sounding like like a TION or a TIAN or CIAN, an ocean. Yet in occupational health administration, the pronunciation is like OSHA likewise, but the N applied to it. And why the N is applied to it, it seemed to be the thing about the equator and the operator. And 90 degree about what it is to an electronic schematic fish, a symbolic representation of like Christianity, like 1/2 cycle above and below, side by side like McDonald's golden arches, and a degree level of representatives and constitutive participation. The idea between like relation of like architecture and platform as compared to embedding and encryption, and normally economics would give some idea of economics in a way of what only availability means. I mean, even in that way right there between the thought of all that information like right there, but I was kind of like thinking about that because it seemed to be that, the one cycle of frequency above the letter N in Latin terminology. And I'm thinking about, the thing about, the eccentric triangle, and my friend Flicka, and all that talk about, flick, my big, and it's kind of like the Arabic thing of the Persian Gulf. Yet at the same time, I mean, it's kind of like the dolphin in the television series, my friend Flicka, at the same time, it's like Lassie. It's like the collie. And it seemed to be like the collie is like YouTube. Lassie was not ever identified as just being like on YouTube, talking on YouTube. Yet television programming presents, the Chevrolet Corvette, and the thing it seemed to be like the difference between AOL, America Online, and Apple and Oracle, and AOL being the difference between Orion Performance Monitoring and Arion. Even one Justice Park, and I'd mentioned it seemed to be, thinking like even surfing the internet, or like my name, Wade, and the thought of like surfing the internet as like front lines of the beach of like international financial management, or making a grade beyond internet protocol of local area network of maritime law, getting all amphibious, and J. Edgar Hoover about the thing about being amphibious, and kind of like above the thought of like liquidable equity, or auctioneering, clearance, and warehousing, and this kind and all that stuff that seemed to be somehow involved, but in any case, so like I was thinking about Barack Obama saying that. It's kind of like I was thinking that at first, that was kind of like thinking, man, that is so far beyond like not cool saying that, But I'd read that book, okay, and it's kind of like I knew the information there, but it was just like not really clicking. I wasn't really thinking or trying to find connectivity, other than like, man, I can't believe it's just like, are you really like saying that, for real? But anyway, so like it's kind of like I'd refer to like Barack Obama had referred to like trying to demonize you, yet he was referring to Al Qaeda owning its own communications network, and it seemed to be like all the information like on Cricket Wireless. And some reference to like Al Qaeda involved with the Pulse Club, like in Florida, and all that going on world news, and it seemed to be all that information, and they're trying to demonize, and some idea with all that information on television, all within like minutes and seconds, if not on the same channel, different channel, and all that going on for like weeks, on television at the same time. And it seemed to be that yet it presents like the Israeli flag presenting two Delta forces, and Barack Obama referring to it like the secret certificates over in the country in the history of the U.S. dollar below the equator in Latin America involving a mammon. Yet the transition, it seemed that Latin terminology was being referred to as like legal terminology, not necessarily the history of the U.S. dollar below the equator in Latin America. Yet it presents all this information. It's almost like it ultimately, like based upon my experience, it seemed to be leading to like a Flag Day, June 14th, 1992, Six Flag Day, SAT Saturday morning, like baptism. Even the book cover of the Psychic War, America's Foremost Psychic Spy, and the cover up of the CIA's top secret Stargate program. I mean, you see like the guys underwater on like the book cover, okay, but the thing with this is that it seemed to be like even the information that it included some idea like Route 66 and the Better Business Bureau and the bird baptism. Even the thought of like Chevrolet Avalanche Z66, but it ultimately 6 being like Dow America's 52 and a VPN, Vice President Network that way. But the thing with this is that all that information, it seemed to be kind of like clicking now, because like the isometric volume I'd refer to, like the MSN 13 is 14 and 55, like heaven in the sky, like at a 9-degree, like Japanese impairment would be like reading Japanese from top to bottom, yet English from left to right, and the 90-degree in linguistic alphanumerics that way. Even the movie titled All the Right Stuff, and it's about the astronauts. I'm not sure if it includes the cosmonauts. I didn't watch it all, at all, really, but it's about astronauts. I'm not sure if it includes cosmonauts. In any case, so like you know, all the right stuff. It seemed to be the thing about, you know, even a 90-degree right angle and openly infinite lines, you know, on a zoom lens in the planetarium, using stars for like, you know, perfect sense vision and navigation. In any case, so like in Latin terminology, with like the half cycle, the one cycle of frequency above the letter N, and it seemed to be, you know, almost like, you know, the B in venue not having a G, yet, you know, Dr. Pepper in the 23-year anniversary celebration, and the 23 ingredients, and the Sigma, Alpha, Delta, Kappa, Phi, and the 23 letters of the acronyms. And, you know, the thing about, you know, digital signal processing and software engineering involving, you know, waveform and special effects of like attenuation and digital, you know, audio, and digital signal processing and special effects in waveform. But anyway, I just want to include that real quick. It's already going on 21 minutes. But I want to include that. I think I'm going to, you know, take a break like already. But I kind of like want to include that, and because I'm going to refer to some other information, but I want to include that because, and I'm going to have to think about it a little bit more, because it seemed to be thinking about the Persian Gulf, and somehow in my mind, Nostradamus, because Orson Welles is narrating Nostradamus and his predictions and the accuracy of 400 years. And it presents the blue turbines of the Persian Gulf, yet jet blue at the same time in a jet stream. And the blue turbines of, like, you know, Orson Welles like narrating like Nostradamus and the accuracy of, you know, 400 years going into the new millennium being the year 2000, and combined with like the 400 years actually like the highest possible score on an SAT test of 2400. In any case, so like I kind of like wanting to include it because it seemed to be the thing about you know, one cycle of frequency above the letter N with like the depth force, you know, like pi or square it is in the Israeli flag with like two triangles or the 6-point star. And now it's like kind of like clicking in my mind. I'm trying to actually place it. I can't think of anything like Univision with the 3 pastels in a black and 3 pastels in a white, and Obama, you know, referring to that. And now it's kind of like the electronic schematic symbol of the triangle identified as like the delta force, and the biggest mouth of the river, and, you know, all that information, and the most misappropriation allocation of Mississippi, and the history of the U.S. dollar, and the secrets of how the Federal Reserve runs the country, and, you know, the misappropriation allocation of Mississippi, and how that's like Latin America and like Amazon, as compared to like the Persian Gulf and like the Nile and Euphrates. And now I'm kind of like actually trying to think about a little bit of the connectivity to both, you know, half above, one cycle of frequency, half above and below over the letter N in Latin terminology, giving that N-Y-A pronunciation, the nya, like in Pena. And it seemed to be that Al-Qaeda, it could actually be pronounced allocation, or instead of the C sounding like a K, like OSHA in pronunciation, like you know, the thing about, you know, you said it new for the foundations of the earth, and just add a little bit of water, and, you know, international financial management using sand software, and the thing about, you know, sand and a little bit of water involving concrete, and, you know, voila, have the foundation issue. And, you know, I got to some idea of like Con Air as compared to concrete, or the discrete, the creed, and you know, but I'll get all that later. I'll have to actually think about it again. But anyway, I want to include that real quick because it seemed to have significance of the Israeli flag, the Star of David, and 2 triangles being like pi or square of like 2 delta forces, and even the history of the U.S. dollar below the equator, involving Latin America and like Amazon, as compared to like now, it seemed to be the reference of Barack Obama, referring to, you know, several information involving Al-Qaeda, and that he's trying to demeasure what the deal is about YouTube, or auditing legal media, or what the deal is about, you know, the Return of the Jedi, not limited to it, but anyway, yeah, so like I thought I'd include that real quick. Yeah, so like I'm gonna have to think about that a little bit more anyway, and get think about the cycles of both the letter N in orientation, in perspective with the Persian Gulf and the Nile and Euphrates, and it's probably going to have the Israeli being 73 in Harris and Union being 73 in Egypt. It'll probably be that connectivity of the alphanumerics of 73 and all that information that I just referred to in that way, identifying, the two triangles as 2 delta force over pi squared or E equal MC squared. Maybe the combine of, the exponential quotients of power multiplication involving what seemed to be the thing about, what I'm referring to, or even that self on the wall, I mean, for real, on County Road 45 in Angleton, Texas, of like, the state, federal, local authorities and the amenities of like, Bedrock and Fred Flintstone, and the executive suite, So like, I thought I'd, include that and, something a little bit about Austin Powers, Blue Bonnet, Paralegal. Yeah. And the thought of like, YouTube being like the collie. The thing about, my friend Flick and the dolphin being on the Atlantic side in the eccentric triangle. Seemingly the difference between like Lockheed Martin, 2 arrows, 4 lines, 3 intersecting axes in the 5th dimension song, up in the air, a beautiful balloon, and the 5 eccentric triangles overlapping each other. And I've referred to that like previously on my channel at WadeSV, PRDDY at YouTube.com. But anyway, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and take a break, and it's getting close to 30 minutes. It's really right at 26 minutes and like 45 seconds right now. But I want to keep that in mind real quick and take a break and maybe talk a little bit something else here in a little bit. Okay, there it is. All right.